You know, every once in a while you get thrown a curve and you have to adjust. And so, unfortunately, Jonas Hudson, who was supposed to be your moderator for this panel, had a family emergency. So I'm standing in a field that is not really my expertise. And so I ask for your understanding in case we run off the rails. But I'd like to, okay, so the title of this panel, I'll be using notes. The title of this panel is Brands Jump In, 360 Advertising and Branded Content. For those of you that were here yesterday, when Joe Staffel spoke of branded content, he didn't really talk about what's happening in the world of 360. Fortunately for me, a couple of years ago, Brian and I met at can't even remember what event that was, VRLA maybe, and started talking. And he said, oh, well, Immersive is an ad network for 360. And I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. A little bit ahead of your time, but that's interesting. And then Frederick. Michael. No, Frederick. Yes, Ovar. I knew Frederick from when he was at 8i, and he had sent me an email, and he said, I'm part of a new company called Omnivert, and we're 360 Advertising. That's two. And so now I'm thinking there's a growth field. Ryan, I had from Specular Theory, and Specular Theory, I got to go back in time for just a little bit as I introduce you guys. So Rose Troche did a video with you guys called Run Around that was with the Donnies and the Amy's.
Oh, that's right, yeah. I thought you were going to say Perspective.
Perspective I love, but that music video was what, if you have the chance to see it, it's called Runaway. And it's the Amy's and the Donnies and the Amy's. Run Around, sorry.
Amy's, yeah.
The Amy's and the Donnies. I still think that stands up as like the best music video in VR.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, that was in 2015, I think.
It still stands up. It was just so innovative what you did, you know. So now we have Ad Network, Creative Production House, and at the very end we have Jake from Create, which is an advertising agency. And so we're going to start to talk about what brands are doing in this space. You know, that's the big thing. Everybody goes, oh, well, you could go get money from a brand, you know, but not really. And I just want to say that everybody that's up here right now, you know, we've really tried to do our best today to over the last 2 days to bring you the absolute best people and the pioneers. And there's, I'm sure you've heard it, but there's mediocre content in VR. These people do not do mediocre content in VR, which is great. So I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves and say exactly what you do, and then we're going to get into the conversation. I know we have some videos to see, and feel free to hijack the panel if you think that I don't know what I'm talking about. So,
I guess I'll start. Hi, everyone. Is this working? Can you hear me? Yep. Okay, cool. I couldn't hear myself. My name is Michael Rucker. I'm the co-founder and chief operating officer at Omnivert. Omnivert is a virtual reality and 360 video advertising platform for brands and publishers. So what does that mean? Today, really, that's 360 video distribution on the New York Times, on Wall Street Journal, on Vice, on Time Inc. So if you've seen a brand create a 360 video and you've been in your Facebook feed, or maybe you've been on YouTube, Omnivert's the technology that powers those solutions for New York Times 360 video ads or Time Inc. 360 video ads. So half of our business is working with publishers to distribute their branded content experiences. And then we work with brands and advertisers and advertising agencies to distribute across our publisher network. So looking forward to talking through this all with you in the panel.
Thank you, Michael. Brian.
Yes, good afternoon, Brian Roth. I'm with Immersive, leading the sales efforts there. We are a VR and 360 degree video monetization and distribution platform. We are working with content creators on different ways to monetize that immersive content that they have created, as well as get that content distributed across mobile and the VR audiences.
Hi, I'm Ryan Pulliam. I'm the CMO and co-founder of Specular Theory. As Brian says, we do not create mediocre content. It's exceptional content. But yeah, we do all, I guess this is working too?
Yes.
There's like a weird echo, okay. But yeah, we create VR and AR mixed media, do mostly original content now. We do also partner with brands and studios and pretty much across genres. So a lot of cinematic, location-based games, as well as VCommerce, actually, which is what we're working on now.
I can't wait to talk about that.
Me too.
I'm Jake Black. I'm the head of Create VR, and we create movie marketing kind of tie-in VR experiences. So we just did one for Spider-Man Homecoming and for Ghostbusters last year. So it's a standalone piece of VR interactive content, but in service of marketing the movie, as well as we cut trailers for VR experiences, both in flat media and 360.
I have to say, my first experience of your guys' work was the walk, where I actually was walking on the thing, and I was like, oh my God, this is like, yeah. So,
Thank you.
and
Try it in heels.
yeah. The interesting thing is that the nature of your content has changed since that.
Yeah.
So where that was an experience, now we're really talking about true storytelling.
Yeah.
So I just want to talk about, because we're tossing around 360 VR. Most of you said 360 VR, 360 VR. So I'm not aware. We actually had Michael Mansouri, I think, defined it earlier. Where we talked about VR being totally immersed in a headset, and that being VR versus 360, which is available on your phone and available on WebGL and WebVR. And so I just want to ask you guys also what the difference between those two is.
So from our perspective, we really focus today on 360 video, and the reason I say 360 VR is because that format can also live inside of a headset as a stereoscopic 360 experience. But from a brand and an advertising perspective, ultimately, they want to have an impact. They're creating this asset to drive people to the movie theater or to get you to buy a car, and if no one's seeing that, or at least not enough scale is there for them to see that, it's hard for them to justify that investment. So really, we focus on 360 video. Even if it is a VR experience, we'll take it as a 360 video and put it out on the web, on mobile phones, on the mobile web, so that people can see it. So I think the reason we say 360 VR is because aspirationally, where the market's going and where we want to be as a business is to power advertising experiences inside of VR and inside of headsets like immersive. But the reality about where the market is in terms of distribution today, 90% of our business is 360 video on the web.
Yeah, I mean, myself personally, I look at it more as, is it live action or computer graphics, or is it a 360 photo, or is it computer graphics? I mean, I think that, yes, virtual reality could be looking at a 360-degree video, but that's more of what is being captured as and kind of the medium, if you will, as opposed to yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. You could say virtual reality is 360-degree video, and that you're virtually in that place. That's your reality. But I try to discern between computer graphics and not.
Ryan.
Yeah, I kind of come at it from, I guess, Michael's perspective too, where, if you talk to a technical person, there's obviously technical differences, and if you talk to sort of a purist, they're going to be more VR versus 360. From a brand and advertising perspective, I would say the difference is stats. So, I think VR is amazing, and you can create these epic, high-fidelity experiences, but like you said, if you don't have enough headsets out there, it's going to be really hard to get some sort of KPI that gets you the client that you need and to have some sort of impact. But that being said, I mean, we've just on our YouTube channel alone, for Specular Theory, we've only really posted our original work on there. And I mean, I think we've been averaging about 100,000 minutes being watched each month for the past 3 months, which is, for a startup too, these are not bad numbers. And I think that you can get a lot of engagement on YouTube 360. And I do think that it does provide a gateway to VR. And in my opinion, it's, we try and push everything to every platform. So why not? Why not have it on YouTube 360 and in your headset? And obviously the quality may be different or interactivity, but.
Okay, Jake, how do you explain this to brands?
I mean, for me, I look at it as a sliding scale of, for me, it's less about live action versus CG and more about fully passive to fully interactive. And there's sort of a spectrum where, you could look at YouTube to cardboard to gear to PlayStation to Vive, and it's sort of how expensive is it, and that directly correlates to how many units have they sold, and how many people have actually seen the content on there. And so it's really important to say I can get this in front of as many eyeballs as possible, therefore giving you some sort of ROI. But there has to be some really high-level decisions about what is the content that you actually want to create. Is it a video? Is it passive? Do you want to create something interactive but make passive parts from it that can get distributed further? And so, that's a bigger decision, because sometimes you only want to go for the most interactive, the highest end, blah, 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 and you want to leave that, by itself and pure and make it like, oh, that I have to go to this place to try this experience. Or I can get you a video that, might have millions of views. It might not be interactive. It might not be, real time, but it has eyeballs.
I'm not going to get the measurement, to Ryan's point. I'm not going to get the measurement yet.
Right.
Inside. I mean, we just got heat mapping inside the headsets that let us know where the audience is looking.
Yep.
So I'm a brand, and to be fair, brands are really finding their way in how to create great story and great content in VR. I'm a brand. My first stop is going to be you, or maybe it's going to be you, because
First and only with me.
Sorry, what?
I said first and only.
Or maybe it's going to be you. Like suddenly I go, oh my gosh, every single car brand is doing 360 video, and here I am, Fiat, and now I want to get into Oh, by the way, I didn't like what Mini did, and I kind of like what Volvo did, but what the hell can I do to differentiate myself from Mini and Volvo, and how does that work? Whatever makes a brand want to get into VR. Is it a gamble for them just to say, okay, we're in it, or are they actually looking for numbers?
I think it's everything, really, at this point. I think you had some of the bigger brands in the early days that did do something in VR just because they're notorious for always being the first at whatever emerging medium, which is
No matter how many people they made sick.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Yeah, it was sort of irrelevant, and then they've, now they're probably doing AI or some other next technology. But I will say that most of the big brands that got in a few years ago, like while the experiences may have been somewhat gimmicky, they've now learned from that, and they've seen enough success, especially from the events and on-site things, that they're really throwing down legitimate budgets now, and I think you're seeing a shift from a lot of people just thinking they're throwing a noodle at the wall to, okay, we've made some impact. We can see it with our consumers. Events and marketing budgets make sense in the beginning, but now they really are, I think, starting to invest in it and really see it as, maybe it's coming from their innovation fund or their R&D fund, but they really are getting that engagement, which I think is great. And it's a lot of education. I mean, we do get clients like that, they're like, we just want to do something in VR. Like, we look to you for everything. Go, and other agencies sometimes, when you're dealing with art directors who have their opinions about what needs to happen in storytelling, and there can be a little more, they have an idea of what they want to do in VR, and it's kind of our job to take that idea and really help them craft that into what really will be successful for this medium. But I will say, it's a lot of education for both creators and brands, but it's exciting.
So, Jake, you're obviously, it's reminiscent of the internet, which is that marketing money comes in first before content money comes in first. So you've got movie marketing going on. When you talked about the continuum, and do you advise everything from an installation that might be at Comic-Con, and then taking that content and putting it all the way down where it actually can be measured? How and do you start that from the beginning? And realistically, you said more money is coming into the environment. I mean, I do not work with brands. That's not because I don't want to. It's just because I don't. But I have heard some horror stories on planes, actually, of brands that have gotten into VR and have been severely burned and overcharged and gouged. And so that was maybe a year and a half ago. So I'm hoping that the industry has matured.
There's
But
still a lot of that.
It cuts both ways, though, too. I mean, because especially with people that want to get into it for the first time, they don't know how much time or effort it takes. They're like, oh, I've got this, 50 grand or whatever, and we're going to do something huge. And you're like, no, that's going to be 10 times that. And you try to make it work. But yeah, so when we start these things, actually, we do look at how many deliverables we have. And so actually, for the piece that we did for Spider-Man Homecoming, our very first deliverable on that was a Chinese arcade shortened build. So it's very important for them to get it into location-based entertainment, and especially in Asia. So that's becoming a bigger priority. So now virtually every project that comes into our shop, there's always an arcade or a location-based component. And so that, where I've seen, I mean, they're the publishers, so I don't really have access to those numbers, but they seem pretty compelling to them and enough that they can at least really help cover a lot of their costs. So that's kind of one component to it. Another component then is getting other brands on board, whether it's like a Dell or an Intel or a Gillette or a whatever, and then they can get their logos on it, and then they actually sometimes get the rights to take that that experience and travel around with it, whether it's at their own events or at VR specific events or at movie theaters. So you'll find Dell demoing Spider-Man that we made because that's what.
Yeah, and there's such a shortage of great content to demo. Brian, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the on-site activations are extremely interesting and can be quite compelling. The measurement, let's say, facial recognition of sentiment or whatever it may be, isn't quite there to really measure effectiveness of an on-site activation. But for a brand, let's say T-Mobile is sponsoring the MLB All-Star game, for them to have an on-site, kind of enhanced experience can really resonate with consumers. But I think we're a ways off from the
Well, I mean, you look at what happened at the Super Bowl with Samsung and the idea of bringing people, the soldiers, into the room. Very, very moving. Very
moving.
Great application. You bring up a really good point. It talked about arcades today and activations, and this morning Vicky showed Trials on Tatooine, which I personally love. Trials on Tatooine and the activations that they did at, I guess it was Comic-Con, and the reactions that they got from people expecting, here's a big brand franchise that people know and love, and it's worth it for them to carry the audience into some sort of new experience. And it was distributed, first installation, then it was distributed on the HTC Vive. Are they willing to spend what it takes for that kind of quality to have those kind of activations? And then the secondary window is like a Vive, and then the final window is maybe 360?
I mean, for me, I think what's interesting, we were talking about this continuum earlier, and I think what's so interesting from an advertising perspective is that there's this inverse correlation between cost to produce and distribution of audience, right? So if I'm going to spend lots and lots of money, ideally I want to get an ROI on that experience, but if nobody actually has HTCs in their home and they're playing, then why did I spend all that money on it? I love the Spider-Man Homecoming execution. I think what you've seen now is that if I'm going to spend all that money, it winds up being an experiential activation because that's the only way that they can get distribution when they're spending that much money on creating this asset. But I think that's why I think it's really important, not as a second window or as a third window, but as part of that, hey, if we're trying to get people to go see Spider-Man and we just invested however much money to create this amazing game, how do I leverage that IP and that asset into something that can create scale?
Well,
and so that's where we basically always push our folks for a 360 video export of that.
But they still have an asset that will endure over time. That every time there's a new headset released, they still have an asset, and people still, Spider-Man is an enduring brand. And so they have created something based on a brand that exists that can continue to be evergreen, and maybe they can take pieces of it. So I completely understand where you're coming from, but now you're talking about AMC having made a huge investment in Dreamscape. And Dreamscape this is for location-based content in AMC theaters, which could be anything now. It could be the opportunity for a brand that has placed product in a movie to actually have something in that lobby that actually is an activation for their brand rather than just the commercial where someone's driving the car or, like Minority Report on steroids. Brian, probably a year ago, I said to you, okay, when am I going to have BRoll in VR inside my headset? And is that going to be an intrusion? Because I, as the filmmaker, have worked really hard on getting people into that environment. Please don't interrupt me with a commercial. And you basically told me not to worry.
Yeah, I think it's still TBD. I mean, there are you've got this content that is super high production value and should command a price to consume that content. And ads shouldn't necessarily be a part of that. That's the bottom line. I think it's kind of.
But I feel you could say that, but I'm going to watch South Park on Comedy Central, which I love, and I'm going to put up with commercials. But I also love watching South Park on Hulu, where I don't have to put up with any commercials. So there are choices to be made. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I want to talk about measurement for a second. In arcades and in Sony's VR arcades, they know what they're selling in tickets. In the arcades in China, they know. As a matter of fact, that the aggressiveness with which just one piece, in terms of My Brother's Keeper, has been pursued by arcade systems from like the Ukraine and Belarus to God knows where, to Korea and whatnot, and the terrible licensing deals that no one in their right mind would want to make. But you go, oh, well, wait a minute, that's probably a revenue stream. But in the meantime, I've got to make a media buy. And I have a piece of content. One of my favorite pieces of content, by the way, was Ritz Crackers. It was like 2 Christmases ago, where it was the scenes. There were 3 different scenes playing out, and the decor kept changing, but the stories were the same, because at everyone's Thanksgiving, Grandpa's saying, "Did I ever tell you about the time I stole your father's car?" Blah, 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 blah. And the stories continue. It was enormously effective, but it was only on Facebook. So now I'm going to make a media buy. I've gone to these guys. I have a piece of content, and I'm going to make a media buy. How does that media buy now compare to traditional ad networks and the ROI and the numbers and the measurement?
Yeah, so from our perspective and how we've gone to market is to make it fit into exactly that same media buying process, right? So whether it's WPP, Publicis, giant media agency holding companies that are used to buying banner ads and buying video ads can now buy 360 video distribution. And we basically support the business in 2 ways. They might be going directly to the New York Times, and the New York Times is selling a 360 video ad on the New York Times homepage or in the middle of an article. That's actually white-labeled Omnivert technology. We're not selling. New York Times is selling the media. Or we're going and talking directly to the brand or the agency. Maybe they don't have content, or maybe they do from you guys. And the same way that they're going to say, I want to reach men 18 to 34 on this kind of vertical, they can do that. And that's why we focused on mobile and mobile web, because there's actually scale there. Once you go into a headset, it's going to be very hard to segment that audience.
Drop-off.
A huge drop-off.
You're
So-
not getting the data that you need, which even the measurement systems and tracking aren't in place. So,
And I'd say for these brands, okay, they run the campaign. The next question is, well, how did it perform?
and that was my next question.
Yeah, that's, I agree with Michael. We were talking about it earlier. For the agencies, right now, you have to speak their language and what they're accustomed to buying, and, make it so that it's easy for them so that they can sell it through to the client. And, as Omnivert has also found, at Immersive, we see incredible engagement from a view-through rate or completion rate. Consumers are enamored with the format and enjoy it. But again, you have to make it easy for the agencies and the media buyers. And, they ask about measurement from the perspective of a standard desktop, media buy, which doesn't necessarily fit into an immersive format. And that's really kind of where things are right now, is how are we going to define the metrics and what is measured, viewability, brand safety, et cetera, with those being such hot topics. It's got to fit into that. And I think, one area that we haven't even discussed is really, sponsorship. Sponsoring existing VR content seems to be a pretty easy, low hurdle way for brands to get involved. And I know that, some of the major portals or content creators are going after that, whether it's discovery or et cetera.
Yeah, it was interesting too, because, in the very beginning, obviously we have to pay our bills. And so we're taking as many meetings as possible with the agencies and brands, and really trying to, like I said, take their ideas and craft this amazing experience. And but we're also doing original content with Perspective kind of being our first big hit at Sundance, and we ended up just having a slate of original content. And then one day, we're just like, wait a minute, like why don't we just try and sell the slate of original content that's either already produced, already concepted, already going into post or anything. And And we didn't really know what was going to turn out, but what we're finding is a lot of success with that actually, because original content for brands is a really big thing. And I think that's one of the greatest things about VR right now, is because brands have always kind of wanted to be Hollywood and never really had access to like VFX, people and these top skills and this kind of pedigree type of content. And I think VR for them now is sort of that gateway to get really, because you have to have, you've got to have people that were experts in gaming and visual effects and mobile development, all the in advertising and commercial backgrounds or production, whatever it is. So I think you are seeing a lot of exciting content, but I think the original content and also with the branded entertainment notion, like I do think people need to think outside of, you don't need to like look at a box inside of a box. It's like we have to think outside of the advertisements, and I just think like the experience itself, like you said, like it should be sponsored by someone. So sure, if Coca-Cola, brought you an experience that allows you to hang with the polar bears at Christmas or, whatever it is, like it should just be the experience itself. And I think there is a lot of value that, and even when you look at things like, how brands started sponsoring, musicians and music festivals. I mean, that used to be frowned upon. Like you were basically on MTV and, you didn't want to sponsor because as a band, that was almost like, you didn't make it or something.
Sell out.
Yeah, and now it's like you see, brands had, consumers and fans of musicians were so excited that brands sponsored their favorite, indie musicians and like sponsored these tours that the engagement went up dramatically.
Generational. It's a far different bargain that brands can make in generations. Like my generation feels a certain way about a brand intervening in another generation, says, okay, they're enabling my experience. I know that Lexus stepped out really early in terms of sponsoring VR content. But I find it interesting because, so perception is literally putting you in the shoes of someone who's experiencing bullying. And what was the second chapter?
Perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it was an original series that we created that basically you take sort of these hot button instances. So the first one was a sexual assault on a college campus, and the second one was a police shooting. These are made for Sundance and kind of the film festivals, but the idea was that you would relive the same event through different people's perspectives, and it was just a really powerful piece that we actually worked with Rose.
Sorry, and I've seen both pieces and I love them. My mind is so fried right now, but
bullying was on our list for another perspective chapter.
But the idea of taking that to a brand, these are not easy pieces to watch. They are visceral pieces. In other words, the promise of VR in terms of making you feel something, these are visceral pieces. And the great idea, of course, behind it is that you can stand at different perspectives. You can be the aggressor or the victim. And internally, so I only wonder, when you take that out to brands.
Yeah, those were not... we did actually have Dolby. Dolby sponsored Perspective Chapter 2. For Sundance, and that was because it was actually the first VR film that used Dolby Atmos, their sound system, and from a technology company, it makes sense, and they were a big part of and sponsor of Sundance, so to be a part of our piece definitely made sense. So yeah, but that was definitely not the one that we were outselling, because it is really heavy hitting. It's hard to get be brand friendly in such sensitive, controversial topics. But we've had other pieces, just behind the scenes type content. We're doing a project now with Accenture actually, which is a VCommerce project, which is fashion and beauty and.
So I'm going to talk about that for a second because my imagination, forgive me for going on flights so fancy. My imagination is, for example, say I see a Victoria's Secret 360 ad, and by clicking on that ad, not only do I get to experience it, but then it pulls me right into a VCommerce environment. Is that possible? Is that what we're looking towards? And can you explain VCommerce?
That's so we've been working on a few projects. Two of them are actually launching in the next couple of weeks. This is the first anyone has ever heard of our VCommerce projects. But yeah, the one is exactly that. So we're kind of taking everything we know about cinematic and the success we had, and especially from storytelling and sort of creating these authentic pieces, which goes back to what we were just talking about as well. Because I'm a big believer in just really having a natural, seamless integration of things, which is why I don't like just traditional pop-up or an ad-on-ad type thing. So yeah, this is exciting. We're actually doing a live action narrative, branching narrative. So it's live action, branching narrative, and the way that we shot it, sort of behind the scenes, and it's a fashion experience. But as the people in the video are talking to you, you as the viewer can make choices, and then when you make those choices, it actually affects the outcome, of the final piece. But within it, because it's in this circumstance, it was behind the scenes fashion, right? So within the piece, you can shop and purchase items and get more information. But it's just a very, we kind of have a configurator that's built in, but it's not. It's a new way. No one's doing anything like this that I've seen anyway. But I'm calling it VCommerce-tainment. That's a very long word.
You heard it here.
Whoa.
But that's kind of the idea behind it. Is we just wanted to create something really natural and intuitive, and not just a virtual storefront or catalog, and more interactive than just a normal experience. But if you weren't shopping, you would still be enjoying the experience. As
Literally story-driven shopping.
Yes, VCommerce-tainment.
So VCommerce-tainment. So as you look at brands, and I think that brands have the potential to lead a charge in VR because of the familiarity and trust that with movie brands in particular. I might hear about a killer application, for example, the Trials on Tatooine. Too short. I really wanted a lot more, but still a lot of fun and very as playful as the movie is. It just carried right over. So my question then becomes, can we expect that, because the traditional ad agencies, they wouldn't be hiring. I guess my question is, all the elements for the ecosystem are there. Once consumers begin to acquire the headsets, blah, 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 they get better. Are brands seeking to lead, keep pace with consumers, generally speaking, big brands, or follow?
It's all over the place right now. I think there are a few that are really trying to take charge, and I mean,
Such as?
I would say it's more along the lines of your like Mountain Dews and Red Bulls and like that kind of traditional brand that would reach out for younger 20-something kind of males, which is really the target demographic for who owns a headset. I think there are though a lot, like I think there's a recognition right now that this is the future, whether it's the near future or the distant future, and people realize that there's quite a learning curve. So even if a brand doesn't really think they're going to get the ROI that they might want or that they could get with the equivalent amount of dollars on a traditional thing, they recognize that if they don't start now, they're going to get left behind. And so in 5 years, if there are now in the tens of millions of headsets, and there's a healthy amount of traffic on each of them, they don't want to be just starting then. And that's what we try to teach them is like, if you're just going to start only when it's ready, like quote unquote ready, or when the numbers are there, you're going to be part of the noise. Yeah. So like you need to be here now.
I just wanted to add really quickly on that. So prior to Omnivert, I spent 7 years at YouTube, and like this kind of story feels.
That's why your name is familiar. Okay, I get it. Go ahead.
It reminds me of sort of early YouTube days when we were out in market trying to like get brand. Hey, you should put an ad on YouTube, and we're all used to the skip now button, right? But there were certain brands in the dogs on skateboards, cats playing the piano. Heck no, that's not brand safe. I'm not going to do it. And by the way, I'm going to just put my 30-second TV commercial there, and actually that's a really bad experience. How do you create something natively for the platform? And there were certain verticals that just tend to lean in early on. So for those of you that create content and are thinking about advertising, I will say entertainment, right? It's just their ads are content, right? You want to play, you want to be Spider-Man, you want to play with the IP, whether it's theatrical, home entertainment, or TV. Second, auto. These guys have really big budgets. At the end of the day, they're spending a lot of money on TV and whatever, but they experiment. And to be honest with you, 360 and VR is not necessarily new for them because we've been seeing 360 panorama photos inside of cars and on their websites for years. The technology is becoming just even more pervasive. And lastly, I'd say tourism, and travel, just because of the nature of the format. It's very easy to go into an airline, a hotel group, or a tourism board and pitch I'm going to take you to Bermuda, or Delta Airlines brings you to Vancouver, is a very, natural fit for the media format. So I guess the answer is yes. There are certain verticals that are going to lean in more quickly. I think Red Bull and Mountain Dew is, but I think we're going to see the same trend taking place.
Yeah,
here.
I was just going to add, I mean, brands want engagement. They're all about engagement. They're not going to miss any opportunity to engage. And there's really, I mean, you cannot get a higher level of engagement than in VR. So you might target even more, you know, maybe it's the male 18 to 35-year-olds right now, or you know, millennials. But in now and in the future, I mean, you're going for this emotional sort of engagement that you've never seen before. And that's why, like, you can see it, of course, right now, like on location and at events. But you know, something we haven't really talked about, just thinking of the future of kind of where the metrics are going, is if you get to the point where you can start really measuring, you know, have biofeedback and eye tracking, and you're really tracking where someone is looking for however long, and you can actually get like a positive or negative emotion out of that, and then eventually even change the content in real time. Like it's one of the most personalized, you know, best metrics you could ever have. That's the most measurable, because I mean, we've never been able to, you know, measure or have the potential to measure emotion like this, and that's at the end of the day what brands are all about.
I want to shift gears here for 2 seconds. Something that we have not discussed at all, because we deliberately stayed on VR and 360, is AR. And the potential for brands in AR, at least in my estimation, is huge. Customer service, customer training, and even if it is story-driven, personal assistant, being able to actually have an advertisement take you into an experience. Can you speak a little about what you expect from augmented reality and even possibly mixed reality in the future for brands?
Yeah, so we actually just launched an AR component to our platform as well, recognizing that we're working with brands, and I hate going into a VR pitch and then the agency's response back is, all right, very cool. Do you guys do AR? I don't like to say no. So, right, I want to be like, yes. Now, I think it's still if VR is new, AR is even newer. And I think, once again, one of the biggest challenges with all this is around distribution, right? So the idea that now I'm going to need to download the Aquafina AR app to then place an Aquafina bottle on a table, to take a photo of it, to share on social, like, who's going to really do that?
Okay, unless they have a campaign whereby literally clicking on the barcode or whatnot, you activate it, and somehow your activation of that code gives water to some country in need or something, like one for one, and then you get to somehow experience what the results of that are. You know, it's like,
100%.
what will you do with that?
Yes, and
what's the story that you will tell?
And I think that's where brands still don't know, right? The execution is literally object on table right now. I'm just saying, like, the reality in the market, it's like object on table right now, or look at me, I'm the Ice King from Game of Thrones. It's like a social media selfie. Those are like the two things that I'm seeing in the market. And I think what you just described is really where that opportunity is.
But even data or ingredients or recipes or triggering videos or, you know, confession, I was a part of the production team for Conspiracy for Good in 2010, where people use their phones to actually activate stories through augmented reality. So suddenly, the bottle is a character in a story. It's not just, and yeah.
I mean, they're both amazing mediums, and I think they're both going to be great. And I think at the end of the day, as any content creator or ad network or distribution platform, you know, your job is to know why you're using that medium and to have a purpose for it. And if it's AR, then just make sure that you're using AR, because that's the best way that story can be told. And if it's VR, you know, vice versa. And for brands, I recommend both. Why not? Create something awesome on every medium, because it's a whole new way to monetize and have that. So I think I think each has its limitations, and each has its own creative and technical sort of challenges and opportunities. But you know, certainly, I will say, with especially Apple announcing ARKit, which is great, and it's amazing to see how much influence they really do have, especially with just people calling into our office, you know, once that announcement goes out. Just because everyone, you know, obviously Apple and iPhone's like a huge market operating system for everyone. So I think there's room for both, and the stories are going to be different, and I think they should be different.
Pokemon Go notwithstanding, I actually saw a hack, and I don't know if all you guys saw this, of Mario Brothers. Yeah,
yeah.
in real time in a
Central
park
Park, I
in New
think it was,
York. Yeah, and I was like, wow, the opportunities for product placement, and like instead of jumping on the mushroom, you're jumping on a Twinkie, and then, it adds, and by the way, or you're jumping on an In-N-Out burger, which the burger happens to be over there that you can get it. I mean, just again, only limited by your imagination, limited by the creators, but then also because they're activating things, it's measurable. So it's like, okay, how many burgers are you gonna? Every time you click on a burger, you get a prize or something. So
I think you actually, though, you hit upon something a couple of minutes ago that I think is a really big stumbling block for both AR and VR and advertising, and it is that it's all app install based right now. So in order for me to do whatever the Aquafina experience, I have to find the app and install it and blah, blah, blah.
maybe not that far.
Well,
because I have a scan app that scans a barcode that locates any product for me and tells me what that product
right.
is.
So that's where you need, I think, both of the mediums would benefit. Something will happen someday where there's more of like a continuous bridge, because I think what YouTube does, ad pops up, I can click on it, takes me right to their website, boom, I'm there. If I put a Spider-Man ad on your platform, I can click on it, then I have to download the app, and I have to kind of wait, and I have to engage it. There's no smooth, continuous.
But I guess what I'm saying is, and I want to leave time for questions. I guess I'm saying, if there is a universal AR app, like there's a universal barcode app, like Layer used to be many years ago for AR. They were so far ahead of their time they fell off the map. But if there is this universal app, like barcodes, like QR codes, that suddenly opens an experience because it's riding on the app that you already have.
I think that's why you're seeing Snapchat and Instagram and now Google just rolled out like AR stickers. They're all trying to invest in like their camera platform because they basically view the camera as sort of that next media consumption platform. So the challenge, at least I'd say in terms of AR for our business, is all of that download and activity is happening in Snapchat and in Facebook and maybe in the Pixel camera app, not really. And so that's, I think, where that universal app is. And I think that's why you're seeing these social media platforms do it. But right now, most folks are not opening up Snapchat and being like, oh, I think Snapcode, I don't know. I'm curious if you guys have seen how Snapcodes do. I think the real activity is I'm obsessed with my face and I want to take a selfie.
Yeah,
and so how do I as a brand
it's
take
like
advantage
being
of
a
that?
brand and doing something that's not in your wheelhouse. Okay, any questions? You guys must be exhausted, and I know we're standing between you and drink disruption with brands AR, VR, and MR that you might see in the next year.
Yeah. I mean, maybe there's an opportunity for, actually, I think one of the bigger problems just for everything is just distribution of headsets, of hardware, of quality hardware. So if a brand said like, all right, suddenly I'm going to sponsor Oculus Rift and you're going to get $100 off the headset or something like that. Or here's the special edition, whatever, Red Bull, Mountain Dew.
Well, I would like to make a bid for you all.
Disruption will be critical mass.
Critical mass. I would just like to make a suggestion for you. The Mobile Marketing Association is particularly effective. They are really effective, and every single brand is a member. There is no VR 360 Marketing Association. So go out and start it, because it would really help, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, we trying to do something with the IAB, but their dues are just, ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then it's split between them and the VR AR.
Exactly. It's like I think the business to be in is a VR AR society.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
not
just
working
get
out so
through
well
okay,
either.
dues.
So, okay.
Universal.
So, all right. Jake, Ryan, Brian, Michael, thank you all for being here today. I hope I didn't do your businesses a disjustice.
No, thank you,
Awesome,
Brian.
thank you.
So thank you, and thank you for joining us. If you joined us yesterday, thank you for sticking through. If you joined us today, we were so happy at Storytech Immersive. We thank VIFF and Jacqueline and Michelle and Ori and all the staff here and Trevor and Rob and everybody for making this such an easy thing. We are happy to bring you in and immerse you into the world of VR, and we hope that you actually go away inspired. Caitlin, Irena, and myself, thank you for your participation today. And we thank all our panelists. And we thank Creative BC for sponsoring. And go out and make fabulous stuff.